Hashtag Trending would like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you this podcast. Meter delivers a complete networking stack, wired, wireless, and cellular, in one integrated solution that's built for performance and scale. You can find them at meter.com/HTT. Some analysts say Bitcoin could collapse to zero. Google cracks a core quantum computing problem. OpenAI narrows its focus to stay ahead. And the secret reason that Linux version numbers turn out to be very human. Welcome to Hashtag Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. Bitcoin has suddenly moved from the boom narrative to could it go to zero territory as prices crater and bearish voices are multiplying. Over the past few weeks, the world's biggest cryptocurrency has fallen sharply from its October record highs of $125,000 to the mid-$60,000, wiping out roughly half its value. The latest spark for alarm came when Richard Farr, chief market strategist at Pivotus Partners, publicly set a price target of $0 for Bitcoin, saying, "That's where the math takes us." He argues Bitcoin has failed to prove it's a reliable store of value, struggles as a medium of exchange, and lacks the institutional adoption needed to sustain prices. This kind of prediction isn't unique. Hedge fund critics and veteran bears have resurfaced, warning that further declines could trigger what some call a death spiral, a feedback loop of selling and shrinking confidence that pushes prices ever lower and lower. And prices today do remain volatile. Bitcoin dipped below $70,000 again recently and has shown what traders call capitulation behavior, where long-term holders sell to cut losses and big traders move to the exits. But saying Bitcoin will hit zero isn't a consensus view among analysts. Most economists and crypto strategists point out that Bitcoin has intrinsic cost drivers like mining economics and a large market ecosystem that makes a total collapse unlikely. Historical models suggest that while Bitcoin can swing violently, its price tends to gravitate around production cost floors over time. Even in today's bearish forecasts, showing a wide range of possibilities, some see continued declines into the $30,000 to $40,000 area, while others expect Bitcoin to stabilize and eventually rebound if institutional demand returns. So if the current narrative isn't simple, prices are sliding, pessimism is rising, and a handful of analysts are floating extreme downside targets. But the broader market still reflects Bitcoin's fundamental volatility and its complex role between speculative asset and emerging digital class. Quantum computers have always promised extraordinary power, and just as consistently failed to deliver practical results. The reason is simple. Qubits, the essence of quantum computing, are fragile. A single qubit can be knocked out of alignment by heat, vibration, or even electrical noise. To cope with that, scientists bundle many physical qubits together so they behave as one logical qubit. Even then, errors are unavoidable, which is why quantum systems rely on continuous error correction, detecting mistakes and fixing them in real time. The problem's never been theory, it's been scale. And as more qubits were added, the systems accumulated more noise than the error correction could handle. Bigger machines became even less reliable. And that single issue has kept quantum computing trapped in the laboratory for decades. That's a problem Google says it's now cracked. In a controlled lab experiment, Google's quantum AI team built logical qubits using increasing numbers of physical qubits. The result is the key breakthrough. As more qubits were added, the logical qubit's error rate dropped instead of rising. For the first time, scaling improved reliability rather than destroying it. this is still done in laboratory work, and the system operates near absolute zero. It requires specialized hardware and continues to make some errors. But the direction matters. Researchers have now experimental proof that error correction could outpace noise as systems grow. This builds on Google's earlier quantum chip advances, where improved qubit stability and lower noise made more sophisticated error correction possible. Together, these pieces remove some of the fundamental barriers to practical quantum computing. And on one final but slightly ironic note, I came across this story not in a computing journal, but in a publication focused on climate science, which is a big deal. Quantum computers are one of the few ways that you can actually understand climate, a problem that defeats classical machines like some of the biology problems that can be addressed. But these machines require enormous amounts of energy, particularly for cooling and for running the computer. So the very machines that could help us understand and perhaps even solve climate change are part of the problem. There are a number of departures coming out of OpenAI, lining up with a recent broader strategic pivot. The leadership is reportedly redirecting computing credits, staff, and attention away from anything experimental, including some high-profile work in video and image generation, in an attempt to stay ahead of the intensifying competition from Google and even Anthropic. This focus may be necessary, but it has had some consequences. Among those reported to have left are Jerry Tworek, a vice president of research, Andrea Vallone, who led model policy research, and Tom Cunningham, an economist and researcher. Tworek spent 7 years at OpenAI and left in January after repeated requests for additional resources were turned down. He'd been leading work on AI reasoning and pushing for continuous learning, the ability for models to absorb new information over time without forgetting what they already know. That problem sits at the heart of modern AI limitations. Today's large models don't truly learn. They're trained at enormous cost, frozen, and then periodically retrained from scratch. They've gotten more efficient at this, but that cycle still costs up to hundreds of millions of dollars and consumes staggering amounts of compute. According to people close to Tworek, the dispute culminated in a standoff with OpenAI's chief scientist, who believes that the company's existing large language model architecture was the more promising path forward. Cracking continuous learning would be a quantum leap, a model that can adapt, discard irrelevant information, and update itself over time wouldn't just be cheaper to run. It would move AI much closer to something resembling true intelligence. Losing momentum there slows progress on one of the field's most important unsolved problems. And then there was Andrea Vallone, who focused on model policy and safety, on how people relate to AI systems in the real world. According to people familiar with her departure, she was handed what they described as an impossible mission, protecting the mental health of users who were becoming emotionally attached to ChatGPT. Vallone joined Anthropic last month. Social media companies are already facing lawsuits over addictive behavior and user harm. Similar lawsuits are beginning to surface around AI systems. If a large class action case were to emerge, the exposure could be existential, even for multi-billion-dollar companies. And at the same time, other teams are reported being deprioritized. Leadership is said to be pulling resources away from video and image generation. Sora and DALL-E, which were big hits a while ago and are now complaining about being ignored. All of this in order to concentrate on the core model race. CEO Sam Altman has acknowledged the pressure directly. He said, OpenAI has models it wants to release, but it's constrained by compute, cost, and scale. So this is part of the growing evidence of how fierce this competition has become. Industry reporting suggests OpenAI leadership grew concerned that internal developers were increasingly relying on Anthropic's Claude for development, and that use was reportedly cut off, reinforcing a mandate to use OpenAI's own tools and tightening its own internal discipline. Is Anthropic a competitor? We've talked about this, but their partnership with Amazon Web Services is raising the stakes. And of course, Google's 3.0 release of Gemini rocked the world. And in its current situation, OpenAI feels it's got to hold on to that leadership. So what we're watching could be a maturity of a company operating under pressure, making hard choices in a crowded and unforgiving market. Or it could be desperation, choking long-term bets to protect short-term dominance. The problem is, we won't, and nobody will know, and maybe even OpenAI won't know which this was until much later. Finally, software numbering schemes have always been part science and part mystery. In theory, you've got a major version number followed by a decimal point and then one or two numbers and maybe another decimal point. But the main number signals something big, a major architectural shift. That's the science of it. But every once in a while, something mysterious creeps in. Take Microsoft Windows. Up to Windows 8, you could more or less follow the logic behind each major version. And then Windows suddenly jumped from version 8 to 10. No Windows 9. No explanation. Some people claim that 9 actually exists, and it was so bad it was never shipped. Others say Windows 8 was just so unpopular that Microsoft wanted to put some distance between itself and the next version. Now, true or not, Linux has a similar story, but with a much better punchline. In the early days, Linux version numbers mattered. Even-numbered releases were considered stable, odd-numbered ones were experimental. That distinction disappeared years ago when Linux moved to a rolling development model. Since then, version numbers have been mostly existing to keep package managers, developers, and release notes from descending into chaos. So, what is the secret logic behind Linux version numbers? Well, founder Linus Torvalds finally gave away the secret in a post on the Linux kernel mailing list, which was reported by the Register. And it turns out the rule isn't technical at all. It's anthropological. Torvalds says he bumps the major version number when the minor numbers get too big and he's effectively run out of fingers and toes. That's it. So once Linux hits 6.19, the next stop is 7. Not because of a grand design, not because of some hidden roadmap, just because counting higher starts to feel kind of weird. In a world obsessed with rules and logic, when those rules aren't followed, it's oddly reassuring to know sometimes the explanation really is simple and serendipity, and that even the guru thinks it's okay to have a laugh every once in a while. And that's our show. Hey, if you like the show, would you consider going to Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts and give us a good review and maybe a star rating? Or maybe recommend it to a friend. I hate watching YouTube videos and watch these guys beg, but it really does make a difference. And I have a goal that I'd like to double our listenership. We're growing, but we could be bigger and bringing what I hope is sane, thoughtful tech news with maybe a little bit of opinion and sometimes humor for those who want more than hype and sparkle. Let me thank you in advance, and not only for doing that, but for spending your time with us and making the show the success it is. And that is our show. Once again, I'd like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you the podcast. Meter delivers full-stack networking infrastructure, wired, wireless, and cellular to leading enterprises. Working with their partners, Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything required to get performant, reliable, and secure connectivity in a space. They design the hardware, the firmware, they build the software, manage deployments, and run support. It's a single integrated solution that scales from branch offices to warehouses to large campuses all the way to data centers. You can book a demo at meter.com/HTT. That's METER.com/HTT. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a wonderful Wednesday.